Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of Soundbites for Immigration Success. We're happy to have you with us today. We bring this series to you so you can get to meet your fellow consultants, hear their story and challenges, and their final takeaway pieces of advice for you that hopefully you can use in your practice. I am happy to have with me today Brandon Miller. Hello, Brandon. How are you?
Hey, Monica, how are you?
I'm good. It's lovely to have you here. Brandon, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to become an immigration consultant or enter the field?
Well, my name's Brandon Miller. I have an immigration practice that's based here in Toronto, Canada. I've been in the business, the immigration field for about 15 years, but I think I've been a consultant for 12 or 13 now. I'm not sure. Been a little while. Um, so I got into it a little later in life. I entered in about my 30s, and there, I guess people can date me now, Monica. So the reason that I got into it was actually just a bunch of serendipitous events. And look, I studied law originally, I did an undergrad in law, and then I went overseas to teach English for a year, and I was going to come back and go to law school and do that whole track. But I fell in love with living overseas. And, I started off teaching English. I got to start a business over there and I got to live and just explore. And I think the biggest thing for me is actually just how interesting the world was. Now, at that point, I had fallen in love with, traveling and the world and just being a fantastic place. But I wasn't really happy with what I was doing. And I just found immigration to Canada by accident. And in actual fact, it was a company that was now I term as a ghost consultant. They were operating there, and I started asking, "Oh, how do you do this? How do you do that? Oh, there's a regulatory body and all of these things." So it was um just a bunch of events. So I came back, I got certified, and at the same time, I was looking to transition back to Canada. And the reason is my oldest daughter was born, and I really wanted to move back to Canada and give her kind of an outlook on the world from a Canadian perspective and access all the opportunities that a lot of our clients come to this country for. So, but I still had this kind of balance that I was looking to achieve, which was um, you know, transitioning out of an industry, doing something that I enjoyed, providing stability for my daughter, while at the same time scratching that itch of being able to see what a fantastic place the world was. So I've done all of that by, by coming back here, having the stability for my daughter. But instead of me going to the world, I get to bring the world to me. So again, I love what I do. I've run businesses since I was like 25. And yeah, I'm really, that's how I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how I found it.
Yeah, no, I love it. Your passion, your excitement as you sort of shared your story there is evident in your voice. I love it. So you how many years were you abroad in total? About 10?
About 15, but I was back and forth for the last 5 or so. But yeah, I lived in different parts of Asia and a little bit of the Middle East. So that was fun. And then all the traveling that ensues with that. So,
And
but
f-
yeah, go
and
ahead.
from what I understand, you spent about 5 or 6 years in Korea. You can speak a little bit of Korean, can't you?
Yeah, maybe a little bit. Maybe a little bit. There's some people in our profession that love to tout my Korean ability. It was a lot better about 10 years ago, but yes, I have enough to get by and enough to shock shock some people when it comes out. The language and the face doesn't match. So
Right.
sometimes it's
That's it.
sometimes it's fun,
I
especially when
know.
there's a few drinks going. So yeah.
And I know you spent you spent a number of years in the Philippines as well. You live there, and
Yeah.
your wife is a Filipina, now Canadian.
Yeah. Yeah.
So can you speak any Tagalog at all?
Hindi ko alam. Ambot sa mo, as they say. Yeah, no, you know what? It's funny you asked that because anytime I go and I travel to a country, I try to, adopt some of the local norms, obviously, because you're a guest in somebody's country. And one of the things I like to do is learn a bit of the language. And I'll tell you what, I went out and I took a course for 5 weeks, and it was, it was a really nice school. The instructors are the same people that were teaching Tagalog to the U.S. Embassy. And as somebody who was teaching English before, I know a little bit about what it takes to acquire a language, or at least I like to think I do. But there was nothing wrong with the course. I just came to the conclusion that wow, like the amount of Tagalog or Bisayan or whatever I was going to learn would pale in comparison to the amount of English that was floating around the Philippines. And like, so I got a few phrases here and there, but whereas in Korea, I was 3 hours south of Seoul, and this was in the 90s. And if you didn't speak Korean, like you really didn't have a lot that you could do. So it was more of a necessity, and in the Philippines it wasn't. And I tell you what, I left that class, and I think I was more confused by the end of it because of all the different ways that you can say things. Um, Plus all the dialects and different things that happen in the Philippines. But yeah, it was no, bit of a long answer. Sorry, Monica.
That's okay. But you know what's interesting about that, Brandon, is you're able to put yourself in the shoes of your clients because
Absolutely.
you've lived abroad as a foreign national in those countries, and yet people coming to Canada, you know, we as Canadian born, you and I are both Canadian born, we just assume it's easy, but it's not. It's the language, the culture, all those other aspects. So I want to go
Well,
on
I
to our
think,
next.
oh,
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I think that's actually what allows me to identify with my clients more. And I think that's important because a lot of people assume that I don't understand, I don't understand a lot about the journey, but I do because I've done it in reverse. I've had to settle myself in. Like when I moved to the Philippines, I knew one person. I had one friend, he was Australian, and that's it. I had the same things that a lot of my clients have, and I've identified with where, I know what it's like to lay in bed at night going, what the hell have I done? Like, am I making a good decision here? Like, what's going on? Where's this road going to lead, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a certain vulnerability and trust that you have to put into your process. So yeah, absolutely. It allows me to identify with that. Well, at the same time, I also know what it takes to get started in a new country and what's involved with that. And I think that that's actually one of the key aspects that a lot of people, don't come prepared with when they come here. They don't actually come prepared to understand what the challenges are, the new culture. Back in the days when, the FSW program was the one of the mainstays of immigration. A lot of people just signed up, got approved, and then came in and had never set foot here and had decided that they were going to live here. So, there's a bit of a now with currently with a lot of the workers and the temporary foreign worker program and the students and the different things like that, people get an introduction to the country. But yeah, like getting into a place is something that we as practitioners, I think, and probably some good advice that I could give somebody is understand the journey that people are going through. And a lot of times, our profession is very multicultural, and a lot of people have gone through that journey themselves, so they understand it. But I think that's one of the biggest things that we can add to value to our clients is just understanding kind of what they're going through. So I do understand that. So yeah, I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does. It does. It actually leads to one of our later questions.
Oh,
So, but
fantastic.
I want to focus a little bit on you. So
Mhm.
you told us a little bit about how you uh, s- became an immigration consultant. It sort of found you, maybe, as much as you finding it. It was serendipitous. But tell
Mm.
me a little bit about one of the bigger challenges that you've had in the profession. You could relate it to the industry, your business. I know that's a challenging question because there are many challenges. And then if you have an answer to how you solved it, or maybe you're still solving it or tackling it. So I'll put you on the spot with that question, Brandon.
Huh. One of the many challenges. I kind of feel that I've been very lucky in that I haven't I don't want to be careful. I want to say that I haven't had a lot of challenges. Like things have worked out pretty well for me. And I think the reason for that, and maybe this could be some advice that I could give. I don't know if I can maybe change the question a little bit, but these are some things that I think that I was prepared for. And one of the things is that it's, running a business. A lot of people I find when I was teaching the program were very eager to get their license and then jump into a program, right? Or jump into a business. And it's like, I had already run a business for 15 years previous to this. So, you're running a business a lot of times, or you're working for somebody else, right? So it wasn't really a challenge that I had, but I know it's a challenge for some people when they get started. I think the biggest challenge that a lot of people have, and I find that I even now, is just keeping up with all the changes. And, you know, Monica, you've been around a little while too, right? So you remember immigration a while ago. There wasn't as many changes or updates or things that happened like 10 years ago. It was a pretty mainstay of a system. There would be an announcement here and there and whatnot. And like, when express entry came about, it was monumental, right? And then it was like, but now it seems like we have all of these different streams and programs and policies, especially since like, and it seems that it's gotten even quicker since COVID. So there's a lot. I almost feel like I find myself speaking to colleagues a lot and asking like, "Hey, am I imagining this? Because I feel like I'm being gaslit by the immigration department." I'm like, I'll know an answer, but then I'll hear something else, and I'm like, "Oh, wasn't there a policy?" And I'm constantly fact checking myself, even though I know that that's the way it is, right? And it's challenging because you're constantly having to keep up and constantly looking at things that are coming out and are changing and are impacting other things along those lines. But I guess yeah, I'd say that's probably the biggest challenge right now for me in running a business and immigration.
Just want to follow that up a little bit. You and I spoke off air, and I posed
Mm,
this question to you so you could think about it. And you said how it wasn't so much a challenge, but one of the things that you sort of had to prepare for, or maybe you were prepared because of your prior work experience, was understanding that the path is not always straight. You have these plans in your head, and you
right.
you plan to do them, but the timelines may not be what you expected. Like, in your first year, I'm going to make $1 million, or first year, I'm going to do this. So you had said to me, one of the things that it's important for people to understand is to have realistic expectations and to set
Hmm.
their goals towards that. How would you how does that um s- um how was it for you? Like when you set your goals, what did you find you were realistic in meeting your goals, or you had to sort of reframe them from time to time?
Well, I always try to set lofty goals, and then I never meet my goals per se, and then I do that on purpose because I figure if you know, what is it, shoot for the stars, moon, something like that, land on the moon or whatever it is. That's something that I always do. So I never meet my goals, but I'm always very tempered in what I want to achieve. And I'm always reminded, usually by my mother, who's my biggest cheerleader, usually, is that, they're like, oh, look at all the stuff that you've accomplished and this and that. And then that's when I take stock about the goals. So in terms of setting goals for a business in this, I think a lot of people are really eager to jump into a business and they think that it's just going to be all rosy and this and that. But if you actually look at the numbers, most businesses fail within 6 months. And then if you go like a year or 2 years out, a lot more businesses fail. And, one of the things that I would remind people, and I don't want to be a naysayer and I don't want to, poo poo on people's things, dreams and expectations and goals, but because it's not fair to do that. But it's also the realistic side of it is that people, getting started in any business is difficult, but especially when you're coming into a regulated business where you have a regulatory body and you have all these rules and then you have laws that you have to follow that are changing all the time and you're giving advice. And then on top of that, there's so many different programs. So there was a really good piece of advice that I was given, and I don't know who gave it to me when I started, but they were like, you know, build up your core programs and then draw circles out from there. And one of the other things that I do is I don't generally plan my business around government policy, because anytime a new government comes into play, it generally tends to change a business. So if you're in a certain segment of the business and then, government of the day has different priorities, then you might have a more difficult 4 years. So it's always kind of like that. So I set my goals around that. And I think that people going into that should be thinking along those lines as well.
A good example of that is just the changes that we had last week in terms of the students,
Yes,
the
yes,
caps and the
yes.
pause. You know, the advice in the beginning for many consultants was when I started out was everybody was a generalist because there weren't, I mean, there were a lot of programs, but not nearly as many today.
Yes.
And as practitioners, we became good at a number of different things from the temporary programs and LMIAs and work permits and students to economic immigration. And we could do, some decent TRPs and things like that. We became pretty good at everything. But now it's so vast that a lot of people niche specialize. So I guess what you're saying is don't just niche in one area, pick three or four so that you're competent and good at what you do. Because
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
yeah, I think it's impossible really to be good at every single thing and know everything.
Well, I always laugh. I always laugh at people. I'm like, "Oh, what do you do?" "Oh, I do a little bit of everything." I'm like, and then my inside voice is like, "Well, you do a little bit of everything not very well then, because like how can you do that?" And it's like the highest amount of value that somebody's paid is when they specialize, right? Like it's the same thing if you're a GP or you're a heart surgeon or a brain surgeon, right? Like the specialized surgeon's going to make more money because it's more of a specialty and there's less of, right? So, I agree with you 100%.
That's not to still say I still think we need a great underpinning of knowledge, so that you can, when that file or client crosses your desk, you can look at it and say, I know this, but I'm not the specialist in this area, so I'm going to refer you to somebody, or I'm going to bring somebody into co-counsel.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more, because how are you going to do a consult, right? When you have a consult and somebody comes in and you're looking at that, you're basically throwing them through a filter and understanding, right? That's how I run my consults. It's like, okay, I get an understanding of what they're doing. First off, can I actually consult on it if it's something that's there, and then I won't do it. But the other thing, using the GP and the specialist example, I would say that, the generalist part of it would be the anatomy. Like if you don't know human anatomy, you're not doing any of those, right? So you need to understand your core. um you know you need to understand IRPA. Like that would, I guess, would be anatomy for immigration consultants, right? If you don't understand the regulations or the act, then maybe that's a little challenging for your
So
clients mostly.
Well, Brandon, we've talked about a lot of different things, and weaved within have has been your advice, for other consultants. I want to challenge you with two more questions.
Sure.
Um, what advice would you have for somebody starting off today? Maybe beyond what you said, and I'm just going to add to that. What do you wish you had known when you started off in the industry 15 years ago? So two pieces, and you could tackle which one you want.
So the advice that I would give is don't be so eager to run out and start your own business. Now, I understand that people come from different areas, but again, there's value to working with somebody and understanding. And if you're going to do that, then be very meticulous and deliberate in what you're going to focus on and the execution of that. Understand that you have so many different things that you have to tackle. You're tackling a new business, you're tackling regulatory issues, you're tackling, et cetera, et cetera. There's a colleague, and I don't want to call her out, and I'm sure people will be able to identify her, but she spoke about how she got into the industry. And I believe she worked with a lawyer for like 15 or 16 years or something like that, if I remember. And she learned everything, and she's somebody in the industry that does quite well. And I always kind of, you're not seeing me, but I'm like, kind of like pointing my finger at like, yeah, 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 that's the way you should do it. And I was lucky because really at the beginning of when I started out, I would co-counsel with people. And there's people I co-counseled with where I basically gave them all of my money and I made nothing. But you know what? The knowledge that I gained out of that was absolutely phenomenal. And I think that I really, I think that there's value in that. If you're not going to get that, either doing it that way, but again, know who the people are that know the different areas, and again, and also be mindful that they're not working they're working not for you, but with you, right? So try to align with that. And I think that's a good way to start out, but don't run in like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that and blah blah blah, because the reality is that things take time. And yeah, it's hard to get into any business, but there's a lot of really rewarding things here, and with this industry. And I just think that a lot of people, at least some of the conversations that I've had, they're eager to dive in, and you need there's a lot of tools in your toolbox with that. What was the other question you were asking me? The 15 years, what was it?
The question was what do you wish you had known when you started off? Do you
15
feel,
years ago?
yeah,
Um, that's a difficult question for me. I don't know.
yeah, and maybe it's one that you can't answer because
I
it's
because
evolved the way it's supposed to evolve.
yeah, and that's listen, I look, uh, I try to sound optimistic with a lot of different things, and I just know that my path will unfold the way that it will unfold. So I don't really you
Second
know
guess, I guess.
Yeah, I don't second guess, and I feel like I was prepared to do this. And even when I got into this industry, I didn't open my business for a couple of years, you know, prior to doing that. I actually got experience prior to diving in, and I think it was valuable for me to be able to do that. But I also got different facets of the industry, some things that we don't really focus on. And I think, if I was going to give some advice to somebody, tailoring on to what I was saying, is that try to understand the whole scope of the journey for your client, and really look at how you can provide value to them just outside of giving advice. And really, what I like to say around the people that I work with is that we're not just here to give them immigration advice. We're here to actually provide them as guidance along their journey. It's kind of like you're their Sherpa. I always say it's like an immigration Sherpa. It's like, it's like you're climbing a mountain, but like, oh, if you go down there, you're going to fall into like the abyss and you're going to die, and it's immigration death, right? So it's not good, and that's what we're here to do. But at the same time, going back to what I was saying about laying in bed at night and wondering what's going on, it's that reassurance that we can provide, and that's really the value. So as much as we're in the world of AI, and I'm sorry, I don't want to open another can of worms and all these different things with technology, I think the benefit that we can provide people is that they have that human that can actually reassure them and provide them like, hey, don't worry, we got your back. This is normal. It's the illumination of the journey, which I think is the value. So that's what you should really be providing to your client, because that's what they value, and that's what's not going to be replaceable, at least in the interim, with technology. So don't fear it. But that's a conversation for another day, Monica.
Well, it's a great segue into that, and I think when you spoke for CAPIC at the NCIC, and you actually spoke a little bit to this topic about the
Mm,
value of what you're doing. But I want to say I wrote down your words, the illumination of the journey. But wait until that AI becomes sentient and they can start providing that reassurance.
it already is, Monica.
That's right. Brandon, that's a great way to end this one. Thank you, Brandon, for sharing your knowledge and your time with us. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
All right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you to our audience today for listening and hearing part of Brandon's story and some of his advice. We'll see you at the next one. Thank you.